Hey, Bedit. I'm just trying to test out my streaming here. Do you have any questions? No worries at all then. If you have any immigration related questions, let me know. I'd be happy to help. Hi, Elijah. What do you mean by 67? Hey guys, thanks for joining the live today. My name's Kevin. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I'm just testing out the live right now, just using different softwares, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. I'll be answering anything that I'd be able to help out with while I work on trying to optimize how I do the lives right now. I'm just playing around with some of the software. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I'll be able to, jump in and see if there's anything I can help answer. All right. So let's take a look at post-graduation work permits then potentially, because that is where we do a lot of work at our firm. We have been seeing lots of people reaching out to us with, post-graduation work permit refusals. The reason for the refusal usually, had to do with people, not meeting the requirements, like they studied part-time or they work without authorization or anything of that sort. But the number one reason that we're seeing these days is actually due to not submitting your language test results. And I think that the key reason that people have been unable to submit is because, they didn't know where to upload the fields. Hi, Hannah. Thanks for joining. So what's happening right now with a lot of PGWP applicants is, they're going through the questionnaire that the IRCC has to create your customized checklist. And when they actually upload all the documents, the checklist doesn't list, a language test result as a requirement. And so people mistakenly don't upload it, not knowing that it's a required field, and they end up getting refused. But due to the long processing timelines of PGWPs these days, which is over 6 months, when they're refused, normally speaking, they're supposed to have the ability to, resubmit an application with restoration fees. But what's happening these days is restoration fees, paid or not, doesn't matter, because you need to apply within 180 days of you completing your studies. And so if processing takes 6 months before they refuse you, then you're screwed because you no longer meet the eligibility requirements for the post-graduation work permit. And then basically officers can't approve, the application. So it looks like we are getting a couple questions. Shy, let's see. Question: how high is the percentage chance for permanent residency under NOC 72106? What is NOC 72106? Let's see. 72106. Welders and related machine operators. Let's see. Federal skilled trades. Yeah, so I mean, it's a skilled trades position. I don't know if it's a part of any targeted occupations currently. Targeted category-based selection. Let's take a look. Trades. Does it include 72106? So it does include it. So I mean, potentially speaking, if when they have a express entry draw for trades, category specific, if your score is high enough and you're in the pool and you're eligible for express entry, there's definitely a chance that you might be invited. And so the key thing here isn't just what occupation do I have, but the rest of your profile matters, right? And so we need to take a look at, if we're taking a look at express entry, are you even eligible for, FSW, FST, or CEC to begin with? And then we need to assess your CRS score to see what are the chances of you being invited. Then we can make an assessment of whether or not you have a decent chance at PR. And if express entry is not going to be the best fit, then we start taking a look at other programs like PNPs to see, are there any, programs that might be a good fit for you. And then we have a question from Ujwal. Can I apply for a TRV with PGWP approval letter as the physical copy is taking too much time due to the Canada Post strike? Applying for a TRV without the actual PGWP should be fine. I can't give you a guaranteed answer. We normally wait for the PGWP to actually arrive before we apply for any TRVs. I vaguely remember seeing something about this previously where I think they said you don't need to wait, but don't quote me on this. I'm not 100% sure. And so just search on the IRCC website to see if you can get an answer there. So Shy, trade occupations draws, the last one that happened was back in September 18th, 2025. And invitations issued was 1,250 people with a minimum CRS of 505. And so 505 is still a pretty high score. And so you'll have to see if, you are, a fit for the program in that regard. And then, hi, Belinda. Thanks for joining. You are 7. Who are you and what is your name? My name's Kevin. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I'm sure I won't be able to help you if you're 7 years old. This is not the stream for you. Okay. Any other questions from the stream? If not, maybe I can try and find the answer to the TRV question. So, Ujjwal, I don't know if you're still here, but I did, find the answer. So, let's see if I can share my screen and. Let's proceed. Yeah, let's see. So basically here, after we approve your application to extend your permit, as soon as we approve your application to extend your work or study permit, you can apply for a visitor visa even before you get your new work or study permit in mail. However, you must provide proof that we approved your application, such as a screenshot of the approval message we sent to your online account, your application number, any other document that proves you have a valid and approved study or work permit application. And so, yeah, you should definitely upload all of these documents under client information to make sure that IRCC knows you're eligible for the TRV. So we got another question from Navjot. Hey, I got my PGWP refused due to not uploading language test results, but I took it before applying for the PGWP, but I am currently outside the 180 days window. So I reapplied and restored my status. How long will it take to get the result, and will it come positive? So, I mean, at the end of the day, Navjot, the problem with your current situation is that technically you no longer meet the minimum eligibility criteria for the post-graduation work permit because you need to apply within 180 days of you completing your studies. So I think it's worthwhile that you submitted a restoration application. However, when you take a look at the regulations and the law, the officer shouldn't be giving you another PGWP. The only way that the officer would give you another PGWP is if they use their discretion to overlook the fact that you're no longer eligible. There's a lot of people who are currently in your situation. thousands of people, actually like over 100 people reached out to us specifically about your situation. Right now, there's no definitive answer about what IRCC is doing about it, because most of the people that are getting decisions over the last, few months were the first people that had to apply under the new rules. And so right now, all we can do is, potentially wait and see how these decisions turn out. But I do understand the frustration, because at the end of the day, technically by law it's on you, because it's all in the instruction guides and everything that IELTS was required, and that's probably why you took the test result. But at the end of the day, when you go through the IRCC secure account, they make it look like they're giving you step by step on how to do it, but that's not simply the case, and this is the case for most other applications. You're meant to know the requirements and upload into the fields whatever is required. And so I think it's the uphill battle. I did hear online on, Facebook and on Reddit that a few people have claimed that they received approvals after doing this. However, they're not my clients. I haven't personally seen any approvals come through. And so take that with a grain of salt. So next question, let's take a look. Ujwal, just to answer your question, it doesn't specifically say PGWP, but a PGWP is a work permit, and so you can apply for the TRV. They're not going to mention every single type of work permit available in Canada, so go ahead with that. Kevin Trinidad, hello, good day. I'm applying for my express entry PNP. My wife received biometrics request letter yesterday. I'm the main applicant. Is it normal to receive a BIL of me and my wife on different dates? Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Okay. My relative has a PGWP expiring late next year. Oh my God, my face is being cut. How can I make my face above the text? Guys, you're gonna need to live without seeing my beautiful face, but let's continue answering the question. He's currently working as a cook and a caregiver. The question is the pilot program for March 2026 will be on a first come, first serve basis? What other options to consider, as we are worried about as the visa is expiring a year from now? Thanks. So assuming the March 2026 program you're talking about is likely the caregiver program, it is likely first come, first serve. That's the way it's been for all the previous years. They open the program, it gets filled up, and then it's closed for the rest of the year. And so prepare all your documentation, prepare all of the information in advance, log in the day that it's created, the program opens, and then apply. If he's working as a cook and a caregiver, at the end of the day, there's not a lot of options for him for permanent residency, right? Unless he has a spouse or a common law partner that's a Canadian or Canadian PR. The position itself, caregiver position, is low skilled to begin with, so it doesn't tie to any skilled PR programs, economic immigration programs, and so it's a bit of a uphill battle there. Let me just double check for the cook, not code. I believe it's unskilled as well. Cooks, nope, they are skilled, 63200. So technically, working as a cook, you'll meet the minimum eligibility criteria for express entry, potentially PNP programs and things like that. And so calculate what your relative's express entry CRS score comes out to, and you'll be able to see if it's worth pursuing the express entry pathway. If his score is way too low and there's no way to get him to a level where he's going to be invited, then you might need to consider taking a look at PMP programs. You can take a look at RCIP. There's a lot of rural programs in that regard, but this is all with a grain of salt, obviously, because it is massively difficult to find employment these days. And even with the RCIP, it seems like a lot of communities are closing the applications now, and it's quite difficult to go through the program. Let me just bring down the camera a little bit. All right. Anmol, let's take a look at answering your question. Hi, I initially got my PGWP based on my passport expiry date, which was 2024. And after my passport renewal, I applied for the work permit extension and has been more than 5 months. What do you think the chances are for my approval to come in? So, when you initially applied for the post graduation work permit, depending on the length of the program of studies you took, that's the length of the PGWP you're going to get, right? And so, let's say that you were supposed to get a 3 year post graduation work permit, but you only get a 2 year post graduation work permit. Then once you apply to extend your PGWP, it's going to be extended for 1 year. It's not going to be extended for processing time plus 1 year, right? And so just keep that in mind, and they will approve it because you're eligible for it. It was technically approved back then. And so nothing to worry about in that regard. But let's say 5 months have passed since you submitted that extension, but you weren't supposed to get more than those 5 months, then the likelihood is that the application is going to come back refused, saying you've already surpassed the period that you were supposed to get. So let's see, any questions on TikTok? No questions on TikTok. Yeah, guys. If you have any questions related to express entry, spousal sponsorship, moving to Canada, work permits, post graduation work permits, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll help answer as best as I can. In the meantime, if you guys don't have any questions, I will continue going through some of the emails. Hmm. Usual. One of my friends has a question if you would be able to answer. He's getting married and his wife is a Canadian citizen. He wanted to know if he can leave the country after sponsorship has been filed or needs to wait until the approval. He can travel, but the basis of an in Canada PR application for spousal sponsorship or common law sponsorship is that you're living in Canada with your sponsor. And so if he wanted to leave permanently, then he would need to do an outland application, basically. And then animal. So a follow-up question to add up to that. I completed my studies and then applied for my permit extension in November. Got it in January 2024. Okay, and got my extension till June 2025 based on my expiry. So by calculating the years, I got a 1 year and 6 month extension. And then before my passport was expiring, I reapplied for my work permit extension in June 2025. Um, let's see. Yeah, so you need to let me know how long was your program of studies, and then when you applied for the initial post graduation work permit, and then the date that you got the post graduation work permit. I need that information, and then you reapplied June 2025. So yeah, no, like I need more organized data for me to kind of do the math here. It's just all over the place. Yep, overall, if it's a short-term trip, that's totally fine. Your friend, after submitting a inland spousal sponsorship, can travel, as long as he has like a TRV or an ETA to come back to Canada. The only thing he needs to keep in mind, though, is that when he's traveling, every time you leave the country and re-enter, the CBSA officer is assessing you before you enter. And so if the CBSA officer decides to prevent entry, then that would pose a problem for the spousal sponsorship application. It would be abandoned at the end of the day because the requirement is that you live in Canada. That's the only risk, but it is a small risk because most of the times our clients as well as everyone else have no issue coming back into the country, and so just keep that in mind that is a potential problem that may arise. In the meantime, let's take a look at our PGWP group and let's see if we should answer some questions. All right, let's take a look at some new posts. Please, I'd like to know if someone on a spousal open work permit can go to school. The answer is no. A person on a open work permit may not attend school in Canada. This person here says if the course is under 6 months and the duration of the course is less than 6 months, that you can. That is false. That's only upon initial entry into Canada. My spouse's open work permit application was refused today. The officer noted that I completed only a 1-year program and currently hold a 12-month PGWP. I would like clarification on the following. Can my spouse still apply for restoration of status even though the reason for the refusal mentions that my work permit is only 12 months and does not meet the so-called 16-month duration? What exactly does restoration of status mean? Should my spouse apply for a restoration first and then submit an application for a visitor record, or apply directly for a visitor record? Yes, they can apply for a restoration of status, but it won't be for a spousal open work permit because your spouse is not eligible for a spousal open work permit because your PGWP will be valid for less than 16 months. Restoration of status means that you've lost status in Canada, and you are restoring status. They give you up to 1 chance after you lose status in Canada to restore your status within 90 days to whatever status you're eligible for. So that could be a visitor, worker, student, but you need to meet the program requirements. Should my spouse apply for a restoration first and then submit an application for a visitor record, or apply directly for a visitor record? You cannot apply directly for a visitor record without restoring your status. It's a restoration visitor record. The only difference is that you're paying restoration fees and clicking that box that says I'm restoring. Okay, Anmol, let's see the question that you wrote. Oh, sorry, I typed it wrong. The timeline is such. The initial work permit was applied for in November 2023. Okay, let me write this down. November 2023, initial PGWP made, submitted. Received my PGWP based on a master's program, which is 2 years, so you'll get 3-year PGWP. Received my PGWP Jan 2024. So basically, you are eligible to continue. Your PGWP should have been, valid until January 2027. The expiration was for June 2025. In June 2025 itself, reapplied for a work permit extension, and I've been waiting for the past 5 months. I believe now I have given you the exact timeline. Do you think after giving you the information based on my experience, how will my file potentially get looked at? So yeah, like you're going to be approved and your new PGWP, the extended one, is going to be valid until January 2027. It wouldn't be valid for any longer, but let's say processing timeline for some odd reason extends another 1 year, then you'll be refused after January. Okay, let's answer this person's question. 1, yes, spouse can restore status, but not with SOWP because they are not eligible, because your PGWP is less than 16 months. Restoration means you are restoring your status. You lost it because you overstayed and are fixing it within 90 days of losing. 3, you restore status while submitting a VR application. Sanjay, I have background security check for my military service for PR and TRV applications for well over a year. Currently, I'm on implied status, awaiting my second bridging open work permit in April. I've applied for a writ of mandamus. I need to travel to my home country for an emergency. What kind of travel document am I eligible to travel and return to Canada? Well, if you are from a visa required country, if you cannot apply for, if you're not getting your TRV application back, then you won't be able to come back, so you shouldn't travel, unfortunately. Deanna, hi everyone. For those who experienced the work permit correction with IRCC, how long did it take for the corrected permit? Did it show in your online account or just arrive by mail? With amendments being done, it usually takes a few months. Am I too loud? Okay. Anyone with a PGWP application got approved? No, I'm not going to answer that. Hi everyone, I have a question regarding my husband's spousal open work permit extension application. I work for a small construction company in Alberta. My employer pays me by check and gives me a pay stub generated from payroll remittance. We submitted an employer letter, check copy, and a bank statement. Now I realize that the pay stub is actually from the CRA calculator, not an official payroll system. Will this be okay for IRCC, or should we raise a web form again just to upload an explanation letter? For your reference, I've attached one of the pay stubs. It's fine. Just because you're using the payroll deductions online calculator, it's the same thing at the end of the day. Small businesses use it. I use it, so that's fine. Any May and June study permit and spousal open work permit approval? Oh, yeah. I don't do processing timeline updates like that. Hi, I need help with suggestions for the certification of early childhood assistant. I'm on a PGWP right now and currently working in a childcare. I have 6 months of experience, but want the certification, and on PGWP, I can only study for maximum of 6 months. No, you cannot study for 6 months on a PGWP. That's upon initial entry into Canada. Can someone suggest some courses or colleges in Toronto which is suitable for me? It will help me in PR. Unfortunately, you cannot study even less than 6 months. The 6 months is only upon initial entry into Canada. I've seen a lot of people, like I've seen RCICs and lawyers also talk about being able to study like on a PGWP for 6 months, but to my knowledge, you cannot, because I believe the regulations specifically state that it's initial entry. And so I think it is a point of conversation that people are having nowadays still, but I think I'm right. Hello everyone, how long does it take IRCC to review a reconsideration request submitted to an MP with the MP's formal request for my reconsideration alongside mine to IRCC through MP's official channel on October 1st? It could be fast or slow. It doesn't have a specific time or processing time. Reconsideration requests that we've done have come back with an answer as early as 2 weeks to a couple of months to a few months sometimes, but usually a month to two. Within a month to two, you'll be getting some sort of response. But that's directly when you involve an MP and the MP is able to get you an answer. In other cases where we've done reconsideration requests, there's some that are still pending decision for over a year. And so we've obviously given up on those. Let's take a look. Kim Gregorio. Is there a timeline for OIMP, International Student Stream, once it's in the DIP? Also, what does it mean when your application is in DIP status? For Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, I am not the best person to ask questions to. I don't work on OIMP. My business partner does. And so if she does a live one day, you can ask her, but OIMP is not one that I currently actively work on, so can't help you there. Does Care Aid with HCA certification eligible to apply for a spousal open work permit? Let's take a look. Open work permit for spouse. NOC. What NOC code is a Care Aid? Care Aid. So it is, you're talking about NOC code 33102, nurse aides, orderlies, and patient service associates. Let's take a look if this NOC code is included under the specific occupations. 33102. Yes, it is listed. Let me share my screen for you so you can see. Boom. So 33102, nurse aides, orderlies, and patient service associates. You always need to make sure that you are taking a look at the proper NOC code though. It's not based on the titles, but it's always based on the main duties as well as the lead statement. So take a look to make sure that this is in fact the best NOC code. And 33102, if it is the right NOC code, then you can take a look who can apply open work permits for family members of foreign workers. 33102 is listed. So if you meet the rest of the eligibility criteria, the occupation itself is not going to be something that stops you from applying for the spousal open work permit. Okay. Is nurse aid and care aid the same? I don't believe they're the same, but like I said, it's all based on the duties. So if you're talking about a caregiver, that's completely different from a care aid. Care aides are usually people who are working in, health organizations to take care of the, hospital patients. And so, go to the noc.estc.gc.ca website to take a look at the occupation and make sure that's the correct occupation. Like I said, titles don't matter. And so for you to ask me, are nurse aides and care aides the same? You can only base it off of the job duties. Okay, let's move forward with answering a few more questions. Can I go to India for 20 days, but my PGWP is expiring in March and I have a valid TRV until 2034? Yes, as long as you have a valid PGWP, you can return as a worker. Okay. Okay. Hello, can we apply for a PGWP using an unofficial transcript from the college and instead of a compliance letter? What? Can we apply for a PGWP using unofficial transcript from college and instead of completion letter, college issued, enrollment confirmation letter? Can I use that? It depends because the completion letter depends because the completion letter is required to prove you have completed the program of study. The transcript is required to prove you were a full-time student in all semesters except for the final one. Your DLI is issuing thousands of letters to all their students, so they would be in the best place to answer your question. Transcript does not need to be official. Unofficial or official. But it does need to be final. Okay? All right. Urgent help, health card eligibility. Health card is not immigration, so I'm going to skip that question. Hello, just a question. Can my work experience on implied status be counted as work experience hour for the PR application? Yes. Someone else answered too. This thread is for PGW. Okay, whatever. Okay. I'm done answering PGWP questions on this group for today. Let's go to Reddit and answer some questions. All right, new questions. Anyone else in the same situation? Need advice? Okay, I'll give you some advice. Stock gun. Let's see. I applied for my PGWP on May 1st from Ontario after completing my university bachelor's degree. I'm currently working full-time in a Tier 2 job, but I recently applied for a Tier 1 position and received a call from a recruiter yesterday saying I've been selected for the role. They'll be conducting reference checks next week and will likely ask for documents. Should I simply submit my work authorization letter, or should I mention that I'm currently on implied status and will be receiving the results soon? There's a likelihood that you might not be receiving the results soon. The processing timeline is just an average. I really don't want to lose this opportunity. Okay, yeah, understood. No, I clicked yes on the questionnaire yeah. So, the best thing to do, can I work on maintained status PGWP? IRCC has specific pages that you can show your employer. Show employer. Doop, doop. Hello, OP. That's a frustrating situation. Oh, we actually have a question on Facebook. Let me answer that first before I get back to the Reddit questions. Hi, can my out-of-status dependent apply for a work permit after receiving eligibility letter? I am the principal applicant. not the sponsor, and I recently got my SOWP. So there's quite a bit that kind of concerns me about this question, because a principal applicant is the only person that can technically sponsor their dependent children and spouse. But if you're on a spousal open work permit, you're not the principal applicant, unless you're changing to, let's say, an LMI based work permit, and everyone's switching over to you being the PA, and then the original PA becomes the dependent. But regardless, if your dependent child is out of status in Canada, they can restore their status within 90 days of losing their status. If they're outside of those 90 days, then they're not going to be able to apply to renew their status. They'll have to leave Canada and return. There's a potential where you could submit like a TRP, a temporary resident permit application, for inadmissible people. However, the likelihood of that being approved, I'm not entirely too sure, because I don't know enough about your current situation. Okay, answering the next question. That's a frustrating situation. Because, however, as you already know, you are going to be eligible to continue working for any employer in Canada until a decision is reached on your post-graduation work permit application. There is a specific web page on IRCC that shows what documentation you can show your potential employer to show that you are authorized to work in Canada. I would recommend that you provide information that's contained in this webpage, and that should suffice. I understand that some employers may not accept it, but in that case, there's really not much else you can do. Comment. A personal support worker vs. optometric assistant. I've gotten a few consultations regarding this not code. I'm employed as a part-time PSW. They provided me with a letter of employment, and my consultant guaranteed that I can use it to renew my spouse's open work permit. Do not support OIM. I was interviewed, and they're willing to hire me as an optometric assistant, willing to support OIM. Generally, I wanted to stay as a PSW, but I'm not sure if there are pathways for PR. Do you have any ideas? Please help. Okay. Yeah, that's a good problem to have. Let's see. If there is no pathway for you to obtain permanent residency working as a PSW, then you have to take the job as an optometric assistant if you plan on trying to pursue a permanent residency in Canada. I think that's the only thing that can be said, is you need to take active steps to obtain permanent residency rather than hoping for the best. Yeah. Traveling with a post-graduation work permit. Hi everyone, I'm trying to get an answer for this question. Getting many mixed answers. I applied for a PGWP in June, and my study permit has expired in July. Okay, I have an ETA, which is valid until 2029. I'm currently working full-time. Would I be able to travel and come back to Canada by air using my ETA only? And also, most importantly, would I be able to continue working after I come back? Is there anyone who did the same thing? The answer is, hi, OP. Oh, hi, OP. To answer your question, yes, you can leave Canada during the processing of your post-graduation work permit and return as long as you have a valid electronic travel authorization, an ETA, or a visitor visa, a TRV. And because yours is valid until 2029, you are going to be able to come back to Canada. There is a special measure for post-graduation work permit applicants where even if you leave Canada and return, you can continue working until you receive a decision on your work permit application. This has this is not the case for other work permit applications because technically speaking, what allows you to continue working after you, let's say you have a post-graduation work permit and you apply for a new work permit, what lets you remain in Canada and continue working is something called maintained status, also known as implied status. However, maintained status is lost the instant you leave Canada. And so if you leave Canada and return, sure, you would be able to return as a visitor, but you wouldn't be able to continue working. However, specifically for PGWPs, IRCC allows you to work even under visitor status as long as you were eligible to work after submitting your PGWP. The only other thing you need to keep in mind is you also lose maintained status even if you apply for a PGWP. So when you leave and return to Canada, you are entering as a visitor and you have authorization to work in Canada as a visitor. But visitor status, generally speaking, only gives you 6 months stay in Canada. With current really long processing timelines, there may be a situation where you need to extend your visitor status in Canada. And so just keep that in mind. Hi, OP. You have a valid TRV of 3 years, but a TRV has nothing to do with your PGWP. And so, depending on whether or not your PGWP is going to be valid in the future, yes, you could re enter Canada as long as it's valid as a worker or as a visitor. But the only thing you need to keep in mind is that the post graduation work permit is one time only. You can never apply for it again. So it's a very special work permit that allows you to gain Canadian work experience. Canadian work experience is a significant component for many of the PR programs in Canada. And so while it is possible for you to leave Canada and work outside, gain foreign work experience, and try to come back to Canada for express entry, you'll need to run some potential situations with your CRS score to see if your score is going to be even competitive enough to obtain permanent residency without Canadian work experience. And so I think you require a little bit more, assessment and planning and understanding of the situation before you make a decision to give up one of the most special work permits available in Canada. Oh God, it didn't take my voice. Hi, OP. If you have a valid TRV for 3 years, you can come back to Canada anytime and enter as a visitor. If you have a post graduation work permit that's valid during those times, you'll be able to enter as a worker as long as your PGWP is valid. But keeping that in mind, PGWPs are one time only in a lifetime. You'll never be able to apply for it again. And so it's a very special work permit. And Canadian work experience is a significant component of a lot of PR programs in Canada. And so I would recommend that you take a look at what your CRS score is for express entry with or without Canadian work experience. And if it even makes sense for you to just throw away your PGWP and then go gain foreign work experience. Okay, so has anyone left on applied status, maintained status, and started working while PGWP was still in processing after returning? So I've been mistaken for months, I think. I thought I can't start working until a work permit is approved, so I haven't returned to Canada yet. I had applied for a PGWP when I was in Canada around April's end. I've been out of Canada since June. Based on what I've learned, you can enter on a visitor visa and continue working while on maintained status. Can anybody share their experience if they re-entered in such a situation and continued working while on maintained status? Did you face issues? Okay, that's too many things for me to read. I'll just answer the question. Hi, OP. Yes, if you have a valid temporary resident visa or an electronic travel authorization to return to Canada, you can enter as a visitor and continue working as long as you were originally eligible to continue working after submitting your post graduation work permit application. The only thing to keep in mind in the question that you've written is that you keep mentioning applied status, which is more correctly maintained status. Maintained status is lost the instant you leave Canada. So when you re-enter Canada, you're not returning on maintained status. You are entering as a visitor. Visitors are generally allowed to stay in Canada for 6 months. And so for 6 months, you can stay, continue working, but you will need to find a way to extend your status, leave or come back or whatever in order to, not lose status in Canada. But considering that you applied back in April, there's a very high likelihood that you'll receive a decision while you're on visitor status. So you can return to Canada as soon as possible and start working right away. Okay, guys, I've been doing this for about an hour now, so I think I'm going to call it a day and get back to some application work. Thanks so much for joining and asking questions. I hope you guys all found that helpful. If you guys have any more questions in the future, feel free to join another live of mine and I'll be able to help out. Have a good one, guys.